Good evening, friends. Let us be still for a moment. There comes a moment when a word stops being a word and becomes a doorway. When Jesus said, "I am," he did not sign a name. He opened a way into the presence that is hearing these words right now. Our theme tonight is, what happens when you truly understand why Jesus said, "I am"? We have not gathered to get something, but to lay something down: effort, fear, the belief that God is elsewhere. In the hush, notice the I that remains when thoughts rise and pass. It is not your personality. It is life itself, quietly shining. Do not reach for it, rest, and it will reveal itself as your very being. When this recognition dawns, prayer becomes listening, guidance becomes a felt stillness, and the ordinary room you sit in becomes holy ground, not because it changed, but because you recognized what never moved. If you're ready to hear what speaks when the words fall silent, stay with me. Like the video, subscribe, and comment a symbolic number that marks your step. 11, 777, or 108, so we can walk through that doorway together. This is the heart of I Am, the impersonal presence. Not a phrase to declare, but a discovery to consent to. The why? That says, I am tired. I am happy, changes with the weather. The I that simply is does not move. Sit and notice the sense of being before you attach any word to it. No name, no age, no history adheres there. That silent aliveness is nearer than breath, yet it cannot be grasped. It witnesses thought without being a thought. It illumines sensation without being a sensation. When Jesus voiced, "I am," he pointed not to a person claiming power, but to the presence revealing itself as the only power. Impersonal does not mean cold or distant. It means free of private ownership. The light that fills a room does not belong to the chair it falls upon, and yet the chair is visible. So with this I am, it shines as your awareness, but it is not confined to your story. When fear arises, it rises in the light and dissolves there. When joy dances, it dances in the same light and leaves no stain. In recognizing this, you loosen the belief that you must manage life. Grace begins to act because you have ceased impersonating the source. A simple way to taste this is to pause the sentence after, "I am." Let it end there. Feel what remains when the mind rushes to add a label. "I am now," and stay. Softly. In that space, there is no next thing to become and nothing past to repair. You are not manufacturing a state, you are noticing the one that is already present. If thoughts insist, let them pass like birds crossing the sky. You don't chase the birds to verify the sky. The more you rest here, the more natural it becomes to live from here, and action arises as needed without strain. From this standpoint, prayer is not persuading a distant deity. It is yielding to the I that is God as your being. Guidance is not a voice that argues. It is a rightness, a movement without hurry. Healing is not the fixing of matter. It is the recognition that the light was never ill. Relationships soften because the impersonal presence that is I in you is the same I in the one before you. There is nothing to defend when you meet yourself everywhere. This dissolves the subtle violence of trying to control outcomes and invites a trust that does not depend on circumstances. You can test this in the small moments. Before you answer an email, rest 2 seconds in the bare I am. Before you correct a child, rest there. Before you plan, rest there. Then allow whatever action presents itself to be taken up by the presence instead of by anxiety. You will notice that words carry a tone, timing becomes precise, and opportunities appear without force. This is what is meant by impersonal activity, not apathy, but love moving of itself. The more you live this way, the more you discover that the I am is self-revealing, self-fulfilling, and that your task is simply to refrain from adding a private agenda, to keep surrendering the urge to name and claim, to let the light be the doer, the speaker, the breath. And in that letting, notice how what you once called begins to loosen. The center shifts from the narrator to the aware space in which narration happens. The person persists as a character on a screen, moving in the light rather than being the light. This is the identity shift, not self-improvement, but self-displacement from the tight knot of me and mine to the open field of presence that says only I am. The relief is quiet at first, less argument inside, less rushing to justify, more willingness to wait and listen, because the weight of existence is no longer riding on a small, anxious center. Notice how language exposes allegiance. When you say, I am angry, the person tries to merge identity with a passing state. Resting as presence, it becomes anger is felt, and a gap opens. The sky has not become the storm. The person is a college of memory and projection, a useful mask but a poor seat of truth. Presence is the bare fact of being aware before any label, the luminous I that remains when descriptions fall off. Try to find the edge of this awareness. You discover no boundary, yet it is intimate, nearer than breath. The wave is never separate from the ocean. The thought me cannot stand without the aware space in which it appears. This shift does not erase personality, it redeems it. Humor, tenderness, and particular gifts remain, but they are no longer a strategy for survival. They become expressions of the same presence meeting itself in countless forms. Practice with small pauses. Before speaking, feel the quiet fact of being I am. Let a breath pass without a predicate. Look from that stillness and let the next word emerge. When emotion surges, feel it fully, but keep identity with the one who knows it. Ask. Do not answer with thought. Rest in the question and let awareness answer by being itself. Over time, the reflex to grasp at roles. Parent, leader, seeker softens, and roles are worn lightly. The person fears this because it trades control for trust. It whispers, if I do not hold everything together, things will fall apart. But life is already being lived. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, inspiration arrives unbidden. From presence, action is cleaner. A clear no can arise without hostility. A compassionate yes appears without self-sacrifice. Boundaries become clarity rather than defense. Responsibility deepens, not as burden, but as the natural response of love to the need before it. You begin to sense the same I looking out of every pair of eyes. When reverence for the ordinary grows, decisions simplify not, what do I want? But what is right? Now. Often the rightness is obvious. This is not detachment in the brittle sense, but intimacy without clinging. It ends performing oneself and begins transparency. The body-mind is honored as an instrument tuned by stillness. Even in conflict, something unhurt remains, and from that unhurtness words are chosen that heal rather than win. When the old identity returns with its urgency, notice it, bow to its fear, and return to the unqualified I. Keep consenting to live from presence, and let the person be its servant, to let seeing come before saying, being before doing, and love before being right. And this reorders prayer itself. It ceases to be persuasion and becomes availability. We are not gathering words to reach God. We are letting words fall away so the ever-present can be heard. Listening silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness prior to sound. Sit as you are, let the breath find its natural rhythm, and consent to be here without petition. If a thought arises to ask for safety, supply, healing, notice the impulse and lay it on the altar of quiet. Return to the simple, luminous fact I am. Remain until the nervous system begins to unclench and a soft, causeless peace starts to spread. This is prayer as attunement, like tuning an instrument to the pitch that already fills the room. We align with the presence that already is. A gentle way, close the eyes for a minute several times a day. Let attention drop from the forehead into the chest, as if listening with the heart. Do not manufacture images, let the inner field be unadorned. If the mind insists on activity, use a single word only as a door, hair or simply I, and then set even that down. After a minute, open the eyes and keep the listening going with eyes open, moving through ordinary tasks as the silence listens to itself. When a problem presents itself, make the turn inward before you move outward. Step into the inner chamber and close the door of mental argument. Refuse the anxious rehearsal. Rest, and let the presence be present to the appearance. You are not ignoring the need, you are refusing to meet it from the poverty of a separate self. Often, in that pause, the pressure drops and clarity arrives, a phone call to make, a sentence to speak, a step to delay. Sometimes nothing to do appears, and that nothing is wise. The habit of fixing gives way to the humility of waiting until right action ripens. How do you know prayer has touched its source? Not by fireworks, but by a noticeable quiet that does not depend on outcomes. The inside softens first, irritation loosens, breath deepens, a friendliness without object arises. Then outer adjustments follow in their time. Direction comes without drama, and you move with it as naturally as a leaf turning toward light. Even when circumstances resist, the inner poise holds. This is the hallmark. The peace is not borrowed from conditions. Conditions begin to borrow from the peace. Listening silence also refines speech. You learn to let words be carried by the hush behind them. Fewer explanations, more presence. When tempted to plead with deity, remember the presence you seek is the eye that is noticing the plea. Let the prayer pray itself by staying available. If emotion surges, include it in the listening. Do not push it down or perform calm. Allow sensation to unwind in the vastness that feels everything and is injured by nothing. Gratitude can appear, not as a strategy to get results, but as a natural fragrance of being aligned. Give thanks without an object, thankfulness for being itself. If you need a simple practice through the day, pause before each transition, before a call, a meal, a decision, and touch the wordless core for 3 breaths. Carry the taste with eyes open, letting the ear of the heart remain cocked toward the unsayable. Over time, you will notice that guidance arrives before you ask, supply meets need without strain, and relationships soften because the silence within you recognizes itself across the table. Prayer becomes less a time you keep and more a life you keep, until even effort relaxes and you discover the work being done through you rather than by you. Which is what we mean by grace over effort, or the activity of spirit carrying the weight and we consenting to be carried. I of mine own self can do nothing, the Father within doth the works. This is not a doctrine, but a felt shift from pushing to being moved. Effort has a taste, tight jaw, shallow breath, racing time. Grace has a taste, clarity without hurry, strength without strain, a rightness that requires no argument. You still work, but the work works you. You still choose, but the choice arrives as obvious. Like stepping where the ground is firm, think of a vine and branches. The branch does not strain to bear fruit, it abides, and the life of the vine expresses as fruit in season. Abiding is our part, resting awareness in I am. Again and again until action rises of itself. Then tasks that felt heavy become straightforward. You return emails and sense the one that needs a call instead. You walk into a meeting and the sentence you were going to press is replaced by a truer one. You intend to defend yourself, but find yourself blessing, and the room changes temperature. This is not passivity, it is precision. Zeal becomes accuracy, not by might nor by power, but by spirit, and outcomes bear a peaceable signature. How do we cooperate with grace? Begin by laying down outcomes. Hold the end loosely and attend to the next clear step. Give 3 breaths of inner acknowledgement before you start anything, washing dishes, writing a proposal, or knocking on a door. Whisper inwardly, you do this as me, then move. If clarity fades, pause and return. Grace does not mind repetition, it loves dependence. Establish small Sabbaths through the day, 1 minute on the hour to drop into presence. These micro-surrenders keep the channel open so guidance can interrupt your agenda. When needed, do not confuse grace with avoidance. Grace is not an excuse to delay difficult conversations or neglect duty. In fact, grace equips you to meet them without the drag of ego. A hard truth is spoken, and there is kindness in it. A boundary is set, and there is no lingering resentment. Nor is grace the same as the rush of adrenaline. Adrenaline is loud, flashing. What urgent, grace is quiet, steady, unforced. You can test it by its fruits. Does the action leave a residue of agitation or a wash of gratitude? Does it widen compassion? Is it sustainable tomorrow? Supply under grace looks ordinary, yet timely. The right contact appears after weeks of silence, not by frantic networking, but by a nudge to go where you would not have gone. A problem yields because a fresh angle arrives in morning stillness. The body receives rest, and tension unwinds without your micromanagement. In relationships, strategies of impressing or convincing drop, presence meets presence, and what needs to be said says itself. Even when doors close, there is less drama, a deeper door is sensed just behind, and patience becomes natural rather than forced. Expect resistance from the habit of self-reliance. It will insist, if I do not make it happen, nothing will. Smile and return. Let the nervous system verify that life continues when you do not clutch the wheel. Keep a simple prayer at hand. I am willing, or not my will, but the will of love. Let it cut the knot in the moment of tension. Notice also how grace reorders time, less multitasking, more single-hearted attention. Appointments arrange themselves, delays prove protective, and what once required hours condenses into minutes because you are not dragging a story behind the act. This is why surrender ripens into a gentle non-resistance, an ease of letting things be as they are long enough to reveal what they are asking for, which is what we mean by grace over effort, the activity of spirit carrying the weight, and we consenting to be carried. I of mine own self can do nothing, the Father within doth the works. This is not a doctrine, but a felt shift from pushing to being moved. Effort has a taste, tight jaw, shallow breath, racing time. Grace has a taste, clarity without hurry, strength without strain, a rightness that requires no argument. You still work, but the work works you. You still choose, but the choice arrives as obvious, like stepping where the ground is firm. Think of a vine and branches. The branch does not strain to bear fruit, it abides, and the life of the vine expresses as fruit in season. Abiding is our part, resting awareness in I am, again and again, until action rises of itself. Then tasks that felt heavy become straightforward. You return emails and sense the one that needs a call instead. You walk into a meeting, and the sentence you were going to press is replaced by a truer one. You intend to defend yourself, but find yourself blessing, and the room changes temperature. This is not passivity, it is precision. Zeal becomes accuracy. Not by might nor by power, but by spirit, and outcomes bear a peaceable signature. How do we cooperate with grace? Begin by laying down outcomes. Hold the end loosely and attend to the next clear step. Give 3 breaths of inner acknowledgement before you start anything: washing dishes, writing a proposal, knocking on a door. Whisper inwardly, you do this as me, then move. If clarity fades, pause and return. Grace does not mind repetition, it loves dependence. Establish small Sabbaths through the day, 1 minute on the hour to drop into presence. These micro-surrenders keep the channel open so guidance can interrupt your agenda when needed. Do not confuse grace with avoidance. Grace is not an excuse to delay difficult conversations or neglect duty. In fact, grace equips you to meet them without the drag of ego. A hard truth is spoken, and there is kindness in it. A boundary is set, and there is no lingering resentment. Nor is grace the same as the rush of adrenaline. Adrenaline is loud, flashing. Urgent. Grace is quiet, steady, unforced. You can test it by its fruits. Does the action leave a residue of agitation or a wash of gratitude? Does it widen compassion? Is it sustainable tomorrow? Supply under grace looks ordinary yet timely. The right contact appears after weeks of silence, not by frantic networking, but by a nudge to go where you would not have gone. A problem yields because a fresh angle arrives in morning stillness. The body receives rest and tension unwinds without your micromanagement. In relationships, strategies of impressing or convincing drop, presence meets presence, and what needs to be said says itself. Even when doors close, there is less drama, a deeper door is sensed just behind, and patience becomes natural rather than forced. Expect resistance from the habit of self-reliance. It will insist, if I do not make it happen, nothing will. Smile and return. Let the nervous system verify that life continues when you do not clutch the wheel. Keep a simple prayer at hand. I am willing, or not my will, but the will of love. Let it cut the knot in the moment of tension. Notice also how grace reorders time, less multitasking, more single-hearted attention. Appointments arrange themselves, delays prove protective, and what once required hours condenses into minutes because you are not dragging a story behind the act. This is why surrender ripens into a gentle non-resistance, an ease of letting things be as they are long enough to reveal what they are asking for. And non-resistance is not passivity. It is the refusal to grant a second life to appearances by fighting them in thought. When you stop pushing, you stop lending power to what has none of its own. You allow things to be as they appear, while you abide as I am, and in that abiding the seeming conflict loses its borrowed authority. Non-resistance is the willingness to see without the fog of opinion, not calling an event a disaster before it has finished speaking. Not calling a sensation, my fear, before it has had a chance to unwind. You are present, undefended, attentive, and the one presence proves itself sufficient. Dropping concepts is central to this. Concepts are shortcuts that become prisons. Ideas about God, self, others, time, success. They promise control and deliver contraction. You say, "This is how it should go," and then spend your strength resisting what is. Non-resistance lays down should long enough to meet, and discovers that reality is kinder than the mind's rehearsal. Even notions of spirituality can harden. Techniques, timelines, favorite phrases, let them be tools, not idols. Use them, then set them down, so the living presence can disclose itself freshly, instead of being forced to match yesterday's understanding. Practice with the body. When an unpleasant wave rises, tight chest, hot face, fluttering belly, notice the instant reflex to name it and fix it. Pause. Before the label, feel. Breathe wide into the back and sides of the ribs. Let the sensation unspool without adding the storyline. Ask quietly, without the word, "What is this?" Do not hunt for an answer. Let attention soften around the raw data of the moment. Often the wave crests and passes on its own when it is granted space. The nervous system learns that presence is safe, and the compulsion to control relaxes. Impersonalize what the world calls evil. This does not deny appearances, it refuses to fear them as opposing powers. Treat fear, lack, criticism as impersonal suggestions looking for belief. If you do not give them your name, they cannot enroll your strength. Someone attacks you. Feel the body's surge, return to the eye that is untouched, and let a response rise from stillness. Perhaps a clear boundary, perhaps silence, perhaps a simple no. Non-resistance is not letting harm continue, it is acting without hatred, meeting the wave with the ocean rather than with another wave in relationship. Dropping concepts means meeting the one before you without the archive of your judgments. Notice how quickly the mind says, "He always," "She never." Lay that down and listen for the fresh fact. Ask one honest question instead of delivering 3 conclusions. Watch how curiosity softens knots faster than pressure. At work, the same principle opens creativity. The project is not behind or failing. It is simply here, asking for the next true step. By withholding labels, you allow accurate perception, and accuracy is mercy. Non-resistance lets the law of good operate unhindered. What you resist, you clutch. What you clutch, you fear. What you fear, you empower. When you allow, you verify that only one power is present, and problems shrink to their right size. This does not mean you agree with injustice or invite abuse. It means you refuse to wrestle shadows. You take needed action from poise, report, confront, relocate, without the corrosive story that binds you to what you oppose. The absence of inner friction lends authority to your word, and doors that were sealed by your resistance begin to ease. Keep simple experiments. Spend an hour renouncing adjectives. No, good, hard, easy, just this. Practice saying inwardly, yes, to what is here for 3 breaths before you move. When certainty tightens, whisper, I might be wrong, and feel space return. When a cherished spiritual idea arises, ask, can I set this down and still be? Let gratitude appear for no reason. Let silence answer more questions than you thought you had to ask. Keep consenting to be the sky that does not argue with the weather, and watch how clarity, kindness, and right action emerge without squeezing. And then you begin to notice the world shimmering with the same presence you discovered within. The mug warming your hands is not just ceramic, it is an event in being. The hallway light on the floor is a ribbon of grace. The refrigerator hum is not a nuisance, but a drone undergirding the quiet. Nothing has changed, yet everything is transfigured by a shift in seeing. The ordinary reveals itself as holy ground, not by acquiring holiness, but by being perceived without the film of concepts. Holiness is not somewhere else. It is the quality of presence right here, naked of your commentary. This recognition is practical. Begin with your feet. Wherever you stand, feel the actual contact with the floor. Let the mind's story pause and give attention to pressure, warmth, weight. Whisper inwardly, here. That simple consent reattunes awareness to the living moment. Next, include the breath. Feel it arrive without your management. Leave without your permission. Finally, include the sound field around you, the furthest and the nearest, in 3 touches, feet, breath, sound. You return to the fact that the place you stand is already sanctuary. From here, tasks shift from being hurdles to being liturgies. Washing becomes ablution, cooking becomes offering, emailing becomes a form of care. Take off your shoes of assumption, as the old story says. Not leather only, but the shoes of, I know what this is. Let the child in the next room calling at 2 a.m. be a bell summoning you to love. Let the traffic light be a monk in a red robe, ordaining you to wait. Let the spreadsheet be a field you cultivate patiently until the numbers align like furrows in spring. Nothing sentimental is required, only fidelity to presence. The holiness is not in the object, but in the seamless eye that beholds and animates it. When you remember, the room brightens without a bulb changing in relationship. This changes everything. The cashier is no longer a role but a face of the same life. The colleague who irritates you becomes an assignment in tenderness. You begin to listen beneath words for the unsaid ache, and your response arrives truer and simpler. Blessing becomes a reflex, silent, impersonal, effective. You leave a conversation and notice less residue because you did not use it to defend a self. You used it as a meeting place for one presence recognizing itself across the counter. Suffering, too, is met on holy ground. Pain is not exiled to a profane corner, it is admitted into the sanctuary of awareness. You feel it fully, not to indulge it, but to let it be held by what cannot be harmed. Sometimes it softens, sometimes it stays, yet loses the power to define you. Either way, the altar is kept, and your trust grows that nothing is outside of God. Even the to-do list enters the temple. You take one step, then the next, relinquishing the drama that you must save the day, and noticing how time opens when you serve what is here rather than what you fear. Let the day be punctuated by unannounced sacraments. Touch the doorframe as you pass and remember. Put the phone down as if placing it on an altar. Eat slowly enough to taste grace in the first bite. Say thank you to no one in particular. When you forget, and you will, return by the simplest roti. Feel your feet. The point is not to maintain a state, but to recognize a fact. The sacred is not fragile, it waits in plain sight behind your next breath. The kitchen, the bus stop, the parking lot at dusk, all are burning bushes to the one who has removed the sandals of interpretation and stands barefoot in the immediacy of I am.